Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, lover. How are you?
I'm pretty well too, thanks. We're trying the sunroom again today because we're not totally sure what happened yesterday, but we got compressed and kind of weird. So let me know if we look that way today. I don't think we do, but
No, we look better. Yeah.
well, who can tell? We're hoping we look better, but again, who can tell? Um, so something came up in my memories today. Actually, it would have been from Dr. Mary, but it showed up in mine because he linked to me. And he says, so this is July 21st, 2016, so about 6 months before he got sober, when things were not super. He says, a short list of things I have learnt this summer, because he's European, so he doesn't learned things, he learnt things. One, when you have active research students on a paid internship, the summer is a lot more fun. Two, you get up, go to work, and do stuff that you don't leave until August. I assume that means like syllabus and things like that.
Yes.
Three, you are much, much more motivated to do odd jobs around the house. Mm-hmm. Four, you are very much happier. Five, you remember to do little things that are very much appreciated by your wife, in my case, the wonderful Dana Del Val. And six, when you are doing one of the above mentioned odd jobs, do not use your wife's cooling racks to protect freshly sown grass seed. Seven, remember you are a very lucky person. See note number 5. So that got me thinking about this idea that you noted something the other day about how much, how you went to work to get away from drinking.
Yeah, it's you kind of pour all yourself into your job to make sure you do that right. And I never had any alcohol at work, so it kind of felt like a safe haven. It's weird, but I'm not the only person who's ever said anything like that. We've been listening to some podcasts about this stuff, and there's another couple of people that said exactly the same thing. They get out of the house and be active during the day, and it stops them thinking about drinking.
So, I guess that the point of today is to think about if you struggle with something, be it drugs or alcohol or whatever your addiction is, or to go back to yesterday, the equivalent for me, which would be the Special K bars, get away from it where you can.
Yeah, there was. I've actually read. I've read a report on the study. I never read the actual study, but a guy.
Oh, disappointing, Dr. Mary. What kind of doctor are you?
You're getting this third hand. Some person whose name I can't remember did a really interesting TED talk that you and I both watched about addiction, and it came to exactly the same conclusion. You can't just stick someone in a room and say don't drink or take drugs. You have to give them something to do. You give them an activity. Like when you go to a treatment center, you don't just sit around. You have scheduled time. You have a bit of playtime where you actually talk to each other. You break for coffee. You have art lessons, which were actually
imagine that art helpful to people struggling with addiction.
Art. There you go.
But art's so useless.
Which was incredibly beneficial to me, but it also cemented the fact that I can't draw.
That's not the point.
But it isn't the point. But yeah, so having activities, and they did these studies on animals they did it with bunnies and monkeys, and unless you give a living thing something to do to take their mind off something, it's harder for them to break a cycle of addiction.
So, I'm sorry, I'm distracted by my own self today. Sometimes it's hard to look at yourself. You ever live streamed and watched yourself watching someone else, knowing other people are watching you watch yourself watch someone else? Becomes very meta and a little bit uncomfortable, and it's not working very well.
Yeah, I did that. With Zoom, when my classes all went online. And one thing I learned about that is I touch my face a lot.
Yeah, this is off topic, but see how humongous I look today? Ugh, it's too much for me. I have to look away.
Better?
So much better, kind of. Thank you. Anyway, Um, so I thought it was just an interesting thing because actually, so we never really addressed this very much at all in the 9 week series, and we haven't talked about it yet in this new little thing we're doing, um, as my mother's calling them, shorts, daily shorts. So you had a seizure in the fall of 2015, early in the fall, because I had to take you to and from school that whole
For
fall
6
semester.
months. Yeah.
Yeah, for 6 months. Did you know if you have a seizure of any kind, you can't legally drive for 6 months? So I had to act kind of like I had a first grader again and take Dr. Mary to school and then um, pick Dr. Mary up from school. Anyway, so he had that seizure the fall before this summer that we're referencing 4 years ago. So in that year, even though nobody indicated that the seizure could be linked to drinking, um, you were much more engaged because you were thinking about how to not have another seizure.
Yeah.
So there's a question: do you find it hard to do an activity when there's alcohol available?
No, I don't.
Did you though? I mean, let's go back to 2016 when you were still drinking.
Oh, you know, I invariably always did something and rewarded myself with a drink, or if I was doing something downstairs, I'd be having a drink. But the switch to not doing that for me was, hey, I'm alive. Let's have another cup of tea or another cup of coffee, and that was fine with me.
Kate, what I'll say from the spouse's perspective is, um, I started feeding into that and rewarding him by with alcohol if he was engaged. Do you know what I'm saying? So like if I could get him to help me with yard work, I would say to him,
We go to a wine bar.
we'll go to a wine bar or we'll run across to the liquor store and get some beer or whatever. I started using alcohol because I realized it was the only thing that um, motivated him. Can you believe I didn't know he was an alcoholic?
Hey, you think I didn't know?
Like, I'm a relatively smart person.
I didn't know either.
I can look back on this and go, you were constantly rewarding him with alcohol. And, I mean, I didn't ever develop a problem with alcohol, but you can imagine I was drinking a lot more too because I would say, well, if we do this, we can go get a glass of wine. We can run across to the liquor store. So I was drinking more too.
I mean, that's another tragic side effect of this particular disease. It changes the behavioural patterns of someone you're close to as well.
Well,
I mean,
you're just desperate to find
you-
a way to connect with that person,
Yeah,
so you
well-
do what will get them to connect. So to go back to that question, I think your answer is yes, it is hard to find an activity, but the way you kind of worked around it is you would occasionally do an activity and then reward yourself with
Yeah.
alcohol. Or I would reward you with alcohol.
Yeah, but it was always that was, and it weirdly does motivate you, but
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it motivates you the same way of, if I can pay off this credit card, then I can go shopping again.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
if I don't have a candy bar before breakfast, then I can have a load of ice cream tonight. I mean, again, to me, some of what is so interesting about what we are discovering in these conversations is that there's there's a pendulum of addiction, and Maz's addiction took him to the edge of death. But we all have addiction issues. So, if I don't spend an hour on Facebook, then I can go do something else. I mean, it's all addiction, all of it. And we just judge some of it much, much more harshly than others. But wow, I got up this morning at 5:52, and at 6:40 I realized I had been on my computer for almost an hour. Now, I was reading some articles, I was doing some other things. I wasn't just mindlessly scrolling through Facebook. but I had nothing to show for my almost hour of having been on my phone this morning. And guess what? I got up, I went to the bathroom, I turned on the kettle, and then I spent 50 minutes on my phone. That is an addiction. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to be judged for it. I'm not going to lose my job over it. I'm not going to lose my marriage over it, but that's addiction.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because it's how I start most of my days. It might not be a serious addiction as alcoholism, but I have an addiction to my phone. There's no question about it. And I often will say to myself, if I don't check my phone in the morning, then I can do it later in the day. Well, that's bonkers. That's bonkers.
Yeah, well, no, there is a cellular component to this. I mean, you can think you're addicted to your cell phone, but if they take it off you, you're not going to end up in a 6-day coma.
I'm not equating them. I'm saying there's a pendulum, there's a variance to addiction. And we all probably suffer from some level of it. I'm not saying it's all that. But why does it have to be that? I mean, there are a bunch of alcoholics who also didn't have to go into a 6-day medically induced coma to realize they were alcoholics. You're not all taking the same path. We're not all on the same path. It's just addiction is an insidious thing that from my perspective, when something is controlling you versus you controlling it, or you're giving into something versus saying no to it, that is some form of addiction. Going back to the whole disease conversation, there must be some part of my pleasure center that is fed by scrolling through social media.
It probably is, or it could be just a boredom alleviation.
Well, yeah, to go with Birgit's point, there is too much boredom. It's easy to waste time on things if you're bored that then sort of become habitual, and habits can become addiction.
There's a friend of mine we were talking before COVID-19. We managed to get a coffee together before everything got shut down. But we were talking, and he wasn't the only person I've had this conversation with. It covers both these things: boredom and self-rewarding yourself. A lot of people said to me, we used to go out to bars and you never drank much. In fact, you hardly drank anything. Because when I was out, I had to play a role of...
Oh, yeah, you talked about this.
Yeah.
Say some more. It's so interesting.
That you can't... It's almost like you don't give yourself away. I don't like to drink. It got to the point, Didn't. It got to the point where I didn't like to go out and drink because I wanted to be at home doing it the way I wanted, which I thought was safe, because I always woke up the next day and I wasn't cut up or bandaged or broke or something.
Or in a jail cell because you got a DUI or, yeah.
So you actually get to the point as an alcoholic, and I know it's not just me, where you don't want to go out drinking. If you go out, it's almost like an act. It's like a hindrance. Oh, I suppose I've got to be on my best behaviour now. But when you get home, you think, thank God. And then you can get your drink of choice out. And it's weird, because I sat there going, that's crazy talk. And I thought, hang on a sec, you did that.
Yeah. And
I didn't even know it at the time. It's one of the things I don't think we really discussed when I was in rehab. And that's one of the great things about being sober and being around other happy, smiling alcoholics, or helping someone make the first steps. You truly are all the same. This disease does have the same effects on it. And yes, maybe... It's probably hard for someone to say, yeah, I'm addicted to Facebook. Really? Oh, yeah, but I guess you could be, thinking about it. The same behavioural traits of, I've ignored everything for an hour.
Yeah, and if it controls you, if it's what you wake up and think about, if it's it's your go-to thing, again, it's not going to kill you unless you're, driving and on Facebook.
Facebooking and driving is also a bad idea.
But it's a problem. It's a problem. It's something that has more control of you than you have of it. So I just think that there's value in recognizing that. First of all, I think we love to look at people who are medical addicts, as in drug addicts, alcoholics, the kinds of things that we have groups for. I mean, there's not a Facebook anonymous group that I'm aware of. But we like to look at those kinds of addicts and be very judgmental of them, when in actuality, I think addiction is addiction, and some of it is more damaging, some of it is more physically harmful or emotionally harmful, but the inability to control it is problem regardless of what it is, and I just think it's better to name it and own it. So that's our 15 minutes for the day. I'm never wearing this shirt on live streaming again. I'm sorry, I was so distracted. Holy buckets. Felt like a 14-year-old, so self-conscious today. Ugh, hard for me. All right, we're gonna go. Have an excellent day. Tomorrow I'll be in something else.
She's probably going to change in the next
Then
20
I'm gonna
seconds.
test it before we go live. Wow, that took me by surprise. Have an excellent day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.